Hi, this is Tracy Sher with Pelvic Guru and Share Pelvic Health, and we are actually at the clinic today to answer one of the top questions that we receive, which is if a person will write in and say, I have a pelvic health condition. It could be from postnatal, after delivering a child. It could be from pudendal neuralgia types of symptoms, or any other kind of pelvic pain. And what they will say is, can I do exercises and what can I do? And often the question is, can I do a squat? Am I allowed to do a squat? Will it hurt me? Will it hurt my symptoms more? Is it safe? So what we thought we'd do today is show you a little bit about squat variations and ways to make sure that you feel comfortable doing them. We see a lot of videos out there that focus on how to do squats with weights or how to do just a general squat. But I think what's sometimes missing is, how do we do this if we have a pelvic health condition or a pain condition? And what can we do to optimize that movement and make it safe and comfortable for you? So that's what we'd like to show you today. Okay, so as we talked about, we're going to start with information about how to do a squat. Now, I've got Alma here with me, and what you're going to notice is we're actually doing something with her lying down. Now, does this mean that everyone who has a pelvic health type of condition or pain needs to start in this position? Absolutely not. This is actually one option we're going to show you because we want to show you a progression from the easiest type of thing you can do to something a little bit more challenging that you can do, and then all the way to the highest level. So these are different kinds of modifications you can do. Now again, a lot of my patients have problems with pelvic pain or pudendal neuralgia, and they're very concerned about doing movements that may actually aggravate their symptoms. So one of the things we can do is get them to feel like they can move in the ways that they should for a squat, or any other kind of movement they would do regularly, which we do every day in functional movements, but not feel that they're aggravating their symptoms, or they may even have something called kinesiophobia, where they're just scared to move in those motions. So this is another nice little trick or thing we can do to help. And so what this could look like is as simple as just taking Alma's leg here, with me just seeing, can she move in this position? This is required for a squat, hip flexion or knee flexion. Is this hurting her when she does this? Okay. If this is okay, that's a good sign and indication. Another thing we notice is that some patients have pain with this. Every time they do this, they may get a pulling or pain in their pelvic region or abdominal or glute region. In that case, or even into their hip. So in that case, what we can actually do is have her go into a different angle. And if she said, hey, that's okay, that feels fine, then that's an indication that when she does a squat, she may be better in a position with her knees further out. And again, instead of saying to a patient, you should never do a squat, my question is, how can we modify that so that they can still do a squat type of position, but in a more comfortable way? So we can come down. Now we can also have Alma do this on her own as well, so then she can go through that motion and just see. And what I love about this is that she's doing this without weight. So right now there's nothing on her in terms of gravity. She's just working some other muscles as well, but it's very much just making sure the motion is okay. And again, some of you can skip this and go right to the next phases. But for some of our patients, they really need something like this first to make sure they feel safe with the kinds of movements that they can do and ensure that they feel better going to the next phase. So let's take you to the next phase. We're back to show the next progression of the squat, and you'll notice that now Alma is going to be standing. And actually, you'll also notice that I have the table up higher. And that's for the reason of not having to go as low down into a squat just yet. So if you have the luxury of having a table that will allow you to go up a little bit, or a chair that's higher, I would not recommend starting necessarily with a very low chair. So for this progression, now the next step is going to just go ahead and have you stand up. And if you notice, each time I have her stand up and then come back down, this progression is actually having her use her hands for support and then coming back up. Some other things we're going to notice here is that we don't want her knees to go over her toes. You may not see this full, I don't know if we have her toes on there, but we don't want her knees to go over her toes. We also want her knees to stay separated. We don't want them going in together. And we also don't want them bowing out too much right now. We want just a general how you would go sit and stand. Okay, and some people may not be able to tolerate even sitting for conditions such as pudendal neuralgia, and that's okay. You can go almost to that squat position and then come back up. So you don't have to actually sit, but for those that are trying to get used to this progression, they can actually sit a little bit and then regroup and stand back up. Now, if this feels okay, there's other things we can add. We could add a ball between your legs and some other progressions. But for purposes of this video series right now, we're just looking more at the motion of a squat and doing a progression. So the next progression that we're looking at is still staying at the table here, or a higher surface if you have that option. And what we're now going to be doing, one of two things, or you can do both. We can actually lower the table, and we can also have her now not use hands and just stay hands-free and just go up and down without support from her hands. We could also have her not actually sit now and just have her almost touch her bottom a little bit and then come back up. So if I were to now lower down this table, and maybe again, not as low as a chair yet, but still that's going to be a little bit harder. And then she can still sit for a moment and then come back up and sit and stand back up. And now you'll notice, now we're going to do it without hands. And notice that now we're starting to piece this all together. And again, there's certainly going to be questions that come up that still is safe for me to do, and we're happy to answer any of those questions. But for now, we're just going through the progression, and any other specific questions can be answered. The next exercise progression we're going to show is now on a lower surface, which is actually at the chair. Some refer to this as a chair squat. And so what we're going to show Alma doing now is basically standing up and down, but you'll notice right now the first progression, she's actually using her hands for some support, as well as her bottom, she's touching down onto the chair. Now, if this is easy and you can progress already, the next progression is to potentially take the hands away, and she can still touch a little bit or even sit if need be. And the next progression after that would be to have her do a squat, but now not touch down at all. Just go into that motion. And again, notice the bottom goes back, and you'll also notice that her knees do not go over her toes. So she's tracking nicely, but she's not bringing her knees over her toes. The other variation you can do, let's say she said she had pain with this, or she just felt uncomfortable for whatever reason, what we can actually have her do is go into a wider stance and actually have her toes even pointed out a little bit. So this is referred to sometimes as a sumo type of squat, and this is actually perfectly acceptable if it keeps you moving and you can do this squat motion. So for example, here we're having her squat with a wider position, and this is totally fine. She can use hand support, or she can sit down, or she can go right into the more challenging way of not using any support. Now, some ask us also about, should I be doing a pelvic floor contraction? And that really is a tricky thing unless we know your individual situation. For example, there are women who have weakness of their pelvic floor, potentially, as one of the things during a postnatal period, and they may have some urinary leakage. So it could be feasible that they would also want to do a little bit of a pelvic floor tightening or Kegel type of exercise in addition to the squat. Typically that's done as they're coming up. As Alma comes up, she would tighten up and squeeze a little bit. The concern is that not everyone knows how to properly do a contraction, and some tend to do too much of one and they squeeze too much. So this is again where it'd be nice if you were paired with a pelvic physical therapist or another type of physical therapist that has training in this, that can explain this more on an individual basis. The other reason why we don't always like to say go ahead and do a pelvic floor contraction is that some patients actually with pelvic pain or other kinds of pain conditions, it may actually cause a little bit more of a flare-up when you're trying to contract the pelvic floor. So this is why it would be good to have an individual consultation about that. So the next progression is essentially taking away the chair and now doing more of a full squat, but you'll notice that we actually have some support so that Alma can still focus on her squat form with her bottom still going back, her knees not tracking over her toes too much, but we can actually see that she's still got a little bit of support. We can now take away that support and have her just do a squat now without the chair. Go. And you'll see that she's actually still maintaining the good form, and now she's completely doing a full squat without any type of support or chair to sit on. And then she can go into a wider stance if that's more comfortable. Another thing we often add to these exercises now for a progression would be to do the same kind of squat, but now add a weight. So for example, Alma is now using a dumbbell type of weight for a bicep curl at the same time that she's doing her squat. And you can see how this just adds a little bit more complexity and more muscles are involved in that movement. If you notice that you can do the bicep curl but just cannot go down as far for a squat, that's okay as well. So you could add some extra weight to this as well. Now we also see many times in gyms where you see someone with a bar behind their back or in front, and that's another great progression. And there are many different videos and trainers and physical therapists that show these kinds of videos. What we wanted to do for the purpose of this particular progression is to show you from a lying down position and then how far you can go to where you're standing and maybe adding some weights and other functional movements. So we hope you liked this progression, and we look forward to adding more videos and information for you in the future. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask us at any time, and we would love to hear from you and hope that this was helpful. Thank you.